Okie dokie. Just minimize that. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the stream for, June 3rd. It's an early June morning, afternoon thing. And let me just get, so I can see if anything comes in. So, oh, come on. Twitch is trying to like advertise to me. Hello, welcome to the countdown stream. Hopefully there's some new faces. Is there any new faces there in the chat? Please, if you are, this is your first time watching one of these streams, make yourself known so everyone can welcome you into the orc gang that is the stream crew. So today is a countdown stream to my latest quick step video. I do this every Monday. Although we're going to have some discussions about that because some stuff is coming up. So, let's do that. Let's get that out of the way real quick. So, there are, we're going to have to put the brakes on Quickstep for, about 3 weeks, I think. So, here's what's going on. I'll give you guys, I'll be fully transparent, and I'll explain what's going on, and then hopefully you guys will be alright. So, I can take this off, because I don't need to wear it. Okay, so I work at a office job, and at said office job, I do a thing where I, what should I say? At my job, I work part-time at the moment. I work 4 days a week, basically, Tuesday through Friday. And the thing that's going on at my work is that I share my office with one other person who is quitting on the 14th, or at the on the 15th, quitting not this week, but at the end of next week. And I think that once she leaves, I'm going to be taking over as the full-time person. Which cat is that? That was Romeo. So the story is that I'll probably be moving to a full-time job starting in 2 weeks. So I'll probably have to be at the office on Mondays doing 5 days a week. Now, I know you guys really like the countdown stream, and I did say it was coming back. This is just a temporary thing because what's happening is I likely won't have my job anymore by the end of the month. Gonna, put in my resignation tomorrow. So by July, I should be back. But for next week, I am using my afternoon to go to the YouTube space to film my next video with Thought Slime. So, the next 3 weeks are going to be, I'm going to be occupied at the time when I would normally do my countdown stream, so they're not going to happen. Sorry. But once July comes back, depending upon the first stream that I would theoretically be coming back would be July 1st. But for all of you who know, July 1st is Canada Day, so it's a holiday, which means I'm likely going to be talked into doing something. So I probably won't be able to do a stream that day either, but I don't know for sure yet. So I'll find out, and then we can go from there. That's the main thrust. So that what that means for you is that there's just not going to be countdown streams for the next 3 weeks. Yay. Okay. I got one question right now. Yeah. What do you think about the ethics of judging veterans for taking part in wars that you think were unjustified? Last night, Cypher said he thinks it's a form of bigotry. Um, that's a tough. That's a tough thing to. Um, that's a tough thing because I'll be honest. I think that you can entertain both sides of that argument pretty well. You could say, hey, veterans, they didn't ask to go to war. Very often they went into it because they were either propagandized to, and they're usually very young when when it happens, or they are economically desperate. The other way you could argue is that by being a soldier, you are asked on the regular to commit war crimes, to participate in a war that is widely known to be illegal, that basically to participate in the expansion of American imperialism. And how could you forgive someone for that? My position on all that is that it's very complex, and I don't think there's a perfect answer for that. And I don't know if I'll ever be 100% comfortable being like, oh, veterans are all right, stop being mean to them, but also that, I never go to the full, like, fuck veterans, they have nothing to offer. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Do you feel at all guilty for giving up your work for civil liberties organization so that you can make YouTube videos? No. It was, like, it's a position that I would say, even though it wasn't temporary, was definitely designed to be temporary. It is a job that pays an entry level wage, and on top of that, didn't offer full time hours, and on top of that, has no real like promotion path whatsoever. So, from what I'm guessing, is that it is a position that is kind of designed for people who are either fresh out of university or between things in their life. I'm no different. And I'm sure my successor will be somebody else who, is who's between things. What is the moment where you did the right thing even though it was unpopular? Oof. The one thing, Doughboy DeVito, that I did when I was, I used to be in the academic senate. So at my university, and a lot of universities have this, they have an academic senate where they elect representatives from each of the different disciplines. And for me, I was the academic senator for the humanities. So I was the humanities senator, which meant I was in charge of, because my university was really small, so it was only just me. I was in charge of managing day-to-day activities for, like managing social events and part of the student side of the academic senate, which meant that me and I had a faculty version of the humanities senator as well, and the two of us would collaborate on voting on like changes to the humanities programs and have discussions in a larger senate where we discuss the future of the academic programming at the university. And also on top of that, I sat on the student government governing body with the same position. And when I was in that position, I did two things that I think were that made me that I thought that made me unpopular, but still made me popular, but made me like that I thought were the right things to do. Number one is I basically three things really. I fought with the entire student government to stop transgender discrimination in our sports teams. That they were using birth certificate sex to determine who would be on the team, like what team that they could join. I fought against that. I think I was outvoted and failed, but I did my 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 Mr. Smith goes to Washington moment for that. I also did something similar. So, like, when I was in the University Senate, it was during a time when a student movement was going on in Quebec in general. The university was in Quebec, called the Red Square Movement, which was that the Quebec government was planning on increasing tuitions by like a huge amount because Quebec had had its tuition frozen since the 60s. That resulted in the horrible consequence that Quebecois students were the most highly educated in the country, and they would go to university in province, and they would produce, lots of French like speaking professionals. So you can have like Ubisoft and stuff. But in my mind, the university I went to was a English university in Quebec, and with the liberal changes, because the majority of the students who went to my university were not from Quebec, the tuition increase was not going to affect us, because that low tuition was only for Quebecois residents, and we were all out of province residents. And so we were all paying like, normal university tuition rates. But the entire academic senate was made up of English-speaking people from out of province, including myself, and we were, as a student government, taking a very hostile approach to the Red Square movement, and I was pissed off about that. And I did another, I was very annoying in the academic senate, as you can probably guess. I did another speech about how for every dollar you increase tuition, you're telling poor people they can't go to university, and like how all that went down. So, this was a thing that was on our minds. That got me in trouble. The third thing was that then when the Red Square movement elected the Bloc Québécois, or not the Bloc Québécois, sorry, the Parti Québécois in a provincial election, they decided to solve the tuition problem by, instead of, taxing rich people, the Parti Québécois decided to answer it by just doing humongous education cuts, especially hitting hard English universities. So my university, which was one of 3 English universities in the province, and by a huge margin the smallest, was going to go through some serious budget cuts. And that resulted in a lot of attempts to make austerity on the students and austerity on the school, when we had a president who had his house comped and was paid really well, and all that stuff. So my thing in that situation was that they were doing all of this in these kind of in-camera meetings, which is like when they have a meeting that outsiders are not allowed to come into, and that the things that are said are supposed to be secret. So what I did is I started well, there's another thing too, which is that we had a campus newspaper that was critical of this government, which I didn't have issues with, but was extremely was very yellow journalism. It was very poorly done. So I ran a blog for several months where I blogged about shit that was going on inside the government that was messed up, and I did that. So those are the things that I remember doing that I felt were doing the right thing even when it was unpopular. That was probably the number one situation in which I had power and the ability to try and change things for the better, but had everybody against me. So that's probably why, Okay. It smells really nice outside. I live above a ramen restaurant, and so I'm always just not right above, but above. Interesting. Thank you, Ariel. Much appreciated from the $2 super chat. Okay. Let's see. Hey Soros. Oh God, is that going to be a meme? Oh, I don't know. All right, next one comes from Eric Hayes. Oh my, Eric Hayes. I used to know someone with that name who is now a trans woman and has changed her first name, so that's interesting. Um, okay. Question: thoughts on black people fleeing to the USSR? Uh, I did not know that that happened. It would not surprise me whatsoever. The USSR often criticized the United States for how they treated black people, and I imagine there were some defectors. Alex the Czarist, genuine question. Do you know the lyrics to the Canadian national anthem? I know the English lyrics. I do not know all of the French lyrics. Gad Yariv, can you explain to me the American obsession with Judeo-Christian values? Jews dislike Christians more than Muslims. They didn't persecute us for 2,000 years. Yeah, it was an easy way to try. Okay, so like in America, with the American conservative stuff, first of all, Gad, the country that you happen to live in became a very powerful political ally for the United States in order to establish a power base in the Middle East. On top of that, after World War II, there was some rebranding on the part of a lot of Christians about their approach towards the Jewish people. And as a way to assimilate Jewish communities in America to American conservative politics, not only in the fierce defense of Israel, but like in order to sort of push more conservative and get them more on the right wing of the political spectrum, they started using things like calling the foundation of society Judeo-Christian values. And today, they use it in order to say that they want to push Christian hegemony, but they use the terms that they don't sound like they're anti-Semitic. But you are correct in that in the long scheme of things, Muslims, treated Jews a lot more fair and just than, say, Jews living in Christian areas. There was, for example, in Spain, like a 700-year period where the sort of Taifa kingdoms of Andalusia were these multi-ethnic melting pots of Christians, Jews, and Muslims, and having a pretty good time. And there was a lot of really great cooperation and collaboration, and they did amazing things together. And, then the Christians came, and then they started the Spanish Inquisition. So, gosh. Did you get the super chats I sent before the show? I did not. Sorry. I did not know you sent super chats before the show. Thank you for that. Much appreciated. I mean, they definitely went through. I just didn't see them. But, and, Palestine, the province of Palestine under Ottoman rule did not, as far as I know, did not have like things like the pogroms and like mass harassment of Jewish communities. I mean, if you're going with like pre like modern concepts of how societies ran, Muslims were in general a lot more tolerant of multi-religious societies than, say, Christians were. They just made non-Muslims pay a tax, while, like, in Christian societies, every Easter they would go to the Jewish part of town and start like bashing and destroying things in the Jewish part of town. So, that's rough. Robin Peterson, thank you for the $5 super chat. That's really nice of you. Hey, I can't be a Patreon since you're leaving your job, I just want to support you doing full time any way I can. Thank you so much, Robin. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'm gonna have the talk with my boss tomorrow, so I'm really scared, and knowing that people like you've got my back means that I can make this leap. Yeah, it's gonna be scary. It's gonna be very scary, cause I have a little bit of a cushion, a little bit saved up, but it's gonna be like hitting the ground running. Like I have to really. I wrote up a business plan that I have to put into action. The second July starts and start doing some more stuff. So it's scary. It's very scary. Okay, what's next? What do you think of the idea of an entry-level job? As an anarchist, I have many feelings of the concept of an entry-level job. Oh yeah, well, what I meant by that is if you think about depending upon what your definition of that is, an entry-level job is just the way that I used it is that it is a job that anybody who has that didn't require extensive experience in order to get the experience trap. But even so, it's kind of moved up in a way that, how should I explain this? So usually, yeah, the idea that there are low-paying jobs that you can do to sort of get your way into a company and then move to other positions as you move up. The organization I work for is basically a law firm, a non-profit law organization, and that way, the way that I think about it, I'm in this position, and it's a very small organization, and there's really no new position to move to unless I became a lawyer, and even then, so it is what it is, See you later, Ariel. Thank you so much. Your super chats are very much appreciated. You're one of the reasons why making this decision tomorrow is going to be a little bit less scary, because I know all of you guys got my back. I really appreciate it. These little things these super chats, the Patreons, the PayPal subscriptions, even buying T-shirts, all of it is the collective of that is going to be what I'm going to use to pay my bills, which is scary, but I'm really glad that I've got you guys to help me make more stuff. And you'll notice, because at the end of June I plan on making my first video where I spent basically an entire month filming and editing it, so that'll be fun. It's my first time watching one of your streams. I've watched your channel for a while and really appreciate your content. Oh, that's awesome, Glenn. You can't give super chats. I don't know why. Maybe it's unavailable in Israel or something. I don't know. Might be a geo-locked thing. How much do you think the DNC backing Hillary before she was the candidate affected the 2016 Democratic primary? Was it rigged against Bernie? Oh, fuck yeah, it was. So there's many things that set up the game so that Hillary... okay, couple things. One, Hillary Clinton and the sort of Clinton compound in general is a large organization that... It's a large organization that moves a lot of money within the Democratic Party, funds a lot of elections, does a lot of stuff. In the lead up to the Clinton election, she did this thing where a lot of local races were able to fund more money into her campaign, which was another sign of how the Democrats have decided to suck money out of local races in order to try and take the White House, which has led to the Democrats losing lots and lots of seats. But either way, she had a lot of money funneled in her direction. But also, because her organization has so much money, resting on people in the organization, because there's so much money that is resting on people's elections that come from the Clintons, a lot of politicians were heavily pressured to back her, which meant several things. It meant that it heavily discouraged other people for running for president. Like, people like Cory Booker and such were all ready to run in 2016, but, like, you could tell that the Clintons basically said, if you run against me and lose, I will destroy your political career. So a lot of people were intimidated out of running against her, which meant that the right wing of the Democratic Party was completely emptied out. Two, a lot of the primaries, a lot of the early primaries in the process went like directly through the South, the most conservative states in the United States, even for the Democrats. So the most like right-wing Democratic states changed things early so that Clinton got a massive early lead in the primaries. And then, I mean, first of all, I think that a lot of that stuff was just designed so that she would be able to outspend and defeat any other candidates who ran against her. She actually, I don't think, expected Bernie at all to do well in the primaries. The Iowa caucus victory, or close victory for Clinton, the very, very close, if you guys remember, the Iowa caucus was like this like razor thin victory for Clinton, was a surprise. And then his real not even close winning of New Hampshire was like a blow, because those two states usually define the momentum of the race. Obama winning the Iowa caucus like basically set the tone for the rest of the primary race. So Clinton was worried, and so the South gave her a lead. The superdelegates gave her a lead, and on top of that, there's all sorts of stuff that are coming through, like how Donna Brazile like gave Clinton questions ahead of time in debates and stuff. At least in one occasion, but definitely probably happened more often. There was Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was like openly anti-Bernie, but running the entire DCCC, which is like real like problematic, and trying to at any point manufacture scandals. Like there was one time where the Sanders campaign made like a tiny minor fuck up on something with data, and the Democrats responded by shutting off his access to the voter database for like several days. So like there was a lot of ways in which, not specifically for Bernie, I should add, but like the thumb on the scale is pushed so that the person who is well connected inside the party, it's more designed so that who the party bosses want to win will win, which has changed significantly now. So yeah. Even said, would Bernie have won? I don't know. I think that Bernie went from like a protest vote to an actual candidate in such a short amount of time that it probably would have been impossible to build the movement and organization that would have been needed to clutch those primaries. The only thing I think that would have been able to change things is if other candidates had come in and sort of mucked up the race, but that didn't happen. So Martin O'Malley, Lincoln Chafee, and the other guy just didn't do very well. So in my mind, Sanders just had a surprise victory, did surprisingly well, and that was a sign that things were to come. But now 2020 is the real place where it's going to stick. Yeah. What would it be like if you could run the world? What would you make the world like? Let's see. There would be no capitalism, that's for sure. That'd be the first thing to go. Getting rid of all that capitalism. Because I'm reading a book right now that shows that like everything tied to markets and competition and capitalist stuff is grotesque and makes everything less efficient and worse. So nationalize everything, followed by the dissolution of the state infrastructures and replacement for something that is local and democratic. So, you know, it would be a local society where people live in communes of maybe like a couple hundred people, and highly integrated with each other, trading, making friendships and alliances and things like that. And there would be no more organizations that tell you where, like, who dominate over certain chunks of land and say, hey, if you live in this chunk of land, I own you, and you have no choice over that. All right. The military's job is war and killing. Being in a military is a choice. Americans aren't drafted, and even in countries that draft, you can defy it. Aren't we capable of our choices? Aren't we culpable for our choices? So there's a couple things to say to that, which is that the United States has a way of heavily propagandizing people to think that the military is good and just and does good things. But on top of that, the military in the United States specifically tries to target people who are struggling economically, and very much sets up the military as this place of last resort where a lot of people who are struggling can go to get things that everyone should be entitled to, like free healthcare and university education. And so very often they will find the worst off people and sort of con them into joining the military. And I think that there is that coercive angle to it, is something that we should not go unconsidered. What do you think of superdelegates? I think superdelegates are bad. I think that they are an explicit anti-democratic notion put up by the Democratic Party in order to discourage candidates that might be popular amongst the people, but the party bosses don't want. It is explicitly an anti-democratic notion. All right. All right. Yesterday, Christy got annoyed with people in her chat still supporting Corbyn because he's polling poorly and can't even beat Theresa May. What do you think about that? I think that's bullshit. Jeremy Corbyn has had to fight off his party trying to tear him down, and also with Brexit and people being scared of changing governments in the middle of, committing suicide via Brexit. In my mind, Jeremy Corbyn has, and also introducing a whole bunch of ideas into political discourse, which have not been part of the political discourse in like half a century or more. In my mind, that was a huge political undertaking, and one that Jeremy Corbyn did amazing at. And I think that Jeremy Corbyn should be lauded for opening up the idea space as leader of the Labour Party, and that he gets more and more popular every election. That the next time one happens, he's like he will be prime minister. Jeremy Corbyn will be prime minister. It's just a matter of time. But I know that Christy Winters, as a far right liberal centrist-y person, doesn't like him because I don't know, challenges or privileges. I have no idea. I have given up on trying to understand how somebody who purports to be as progressive as she is keeps supporting like the most right-wing person that she can support. I never get it. But whatever, it's her prerogative. And I don't want to just like start shit for the sake of starting shit. Were the Barbary Wars justified? I don't think any wars are justified. Some liberals aren't convinced that the 2016 presidential primary wasn't rigged against Bernie Sanders. What would be the evidence that you would point to? The Donna Brazil line about questions. Like I said, some random geek. I think this is probably before you asked this question, but I think that the Democratic machine was rigged in favor of whoever the party bosses chose to be the leader. It's very anti-democratic. Clinton then on top of that, had more. Clinton, on top of that, had many things through her funding of elections, funneled a lot of money towards her own campaign that should have been earmarked for other Democratic candidates, and used campaign financing basically to threaten people out of running. Like, this is like the political machinations of the Clintons is fairly well known. Like, everyone should know about like the Clinton enemies list and stuff like that. Like, it's fairly common knowledge, and the fact that she was in control of so much of the Democratic purse strings, like, of course she'd been doing that. She'd basically been preparing to run for president ever since 2008. So this was like the least surprising thing ever. She just, ran for president at a time when things were terrible. She was a president of the 90s and the 2010s. And I wouldn't be surprised. Hillary Clinton on paper would look like an amazing candidate for the way that like right-wing Democrats think. But 2016 was not a normal election. A lot of things that had been buried for a very long time showed their ugly faces in a big way, and the Overton window got blown open in a way that a lot of the centrists couldn't process, and Clinton lost. Okay. Are we going to see a rise in anti-Semitic vitriol if Bernie wins the primaries? And what effect would that have on his electability? Religion is pretty important in American elections. It is and it isn't. I mean, Trump is like a Christian with like shit tons of quotation marks around them. If Bernie wins the primaries, well, first of all, Clinton was already sitting on like Oppo research that was going to use his Judaism to attack him. Not surprising from the person who also used the Obama as a secret Muslim technique in 2008, so was to be expected. But will anti-Semitism, like, I mean, the thing is, like, anti-Semitism is like in a completely new place now in America because of like the alt-right and stuff. So there will definitely be, I definitely think that Sanders will be on have a much higher chance of getting attacked for being like, would be like a higher chance of being attacked by like hate groups. Like, I think the chances are low, but they're higher than they have been in a long time of Sanders being assassinated, for example, by like a Nazi or something. But in my mind, like in America, you can't be openly anti-Semitic anymore. And so they're going to try and find other ways to use anti-Semitic lines, but without like actually saying that like, hey, he's a Jew, don't vote for him. Because not even the most hardcore Christian now can't say that. So it'll be stuff like that's stuff that's already happened, like how Politico recently ran a story where they said that ran a story that was anti-Sanders that was talking about how he is even though he hates millionaires, he's a millionaire, and that even though he's a millionaire, he's cheap and he's a miser, and they photoshopped him next to a money tree and stuff like that. So like, and they got immediate blowback for that, but like that's the kind of stuff that they're gonna do. That's the kind of like that's the kind of anti-Semitic stuff that like the right wing of the Democratic Party are gonna do. And then, yeah, I kind of fear what's going to happen in like Nazi circles, because basically at this moment, what separates conservatives from Nazis, because the conservatives in America have moved so far to the right, the only thing that really separates them anymore is whether or not Jews are behind it all. And I wonder how how attacking Bernie for being Jewish will affect the radical right, because some people in the alt-right are like the alt-right people are super anti-Semitic, but there's also people who are like, just your regular everyday MAGA chuds who don't really think that much about, who think that like they believe in like kind of that thing I said earlier about Judeo-Christian values, and it really depends. It depends upon if you're going to go down. It depends upon if there's going to be like a schism between the Ben Shapiros and the Ben Shapiros and the Richard Spencers, if you will. Last year, Steve Shives made a vid where he said that you can't say the primary was rigged in Clinton's favor because the DNC don't control the primary process. What would you say to that? Well, Steve Shives, with all due respect, that is an extremely simplistic way of looking at Democratic Party politics. That is a very, I wouldn't expect this from anyone, because the thing is, to understand how the Democratic primaries were rigged have a lot to do with knowledge about how Democratic Party politics work. As I said, I think that it's not as simple. I don't think things like the primaries were literally rigged, but they did do things that they knew would prioritize insiders, that would prioritize wealthy, that would prioritize people who are more right-wing. For example, a lot of the states had primaries where if you wanted to register as a Democrat in order to vote in them, you had to register a long-ass time before the primaries, which, in the case of Sanders, who had a surprise movement come up through surprising success in the Iowa caucus, that meant that many times they were not able to get the groundwork to register independents as Democrats in order to get them to vote in the primaries. So that was a way of keeping people who are already invested in the party, people who are establishment friendly, the keys of power. And then, and you saw this in states where it was harder and harder to register as a Democrat. The Clinton vote went up. I don't what I would say to Steve Shives is in those sides of situations, what is the functional difference between that and the fact that in a lot of states they make it really hard to register to vote, period? Democrats call that, when it's done in the general election, voter suppression. When it's done in the Democratic primaries, it's fine. That's the kind of stuff that I would point out. And Sanders did tend to do better in caucus states, because caucus states require long periods of time. Caucuses run very strange. But basically, I would say that, and on top of that, the superdelegate system is extremely unfair. So, in my mind, I wouldn't say that the deck was stacked against Bernie specifically, but that a lot of mechanisms were in place that have been around for a long time to make sure that whoever was preordained to become the candidate was the candidate, and that the will of the people in general was not done. And yeah, and also because journalists and such were the way that journalism works in America, people were so afraid to upset the Clintons, because they knew that the Clintons used things like money and access as their influence, their way to coerce people into doing things. So they knew that if, say, a journalist was critical of Hillary Clinton in an article, or too critical of Hillary Clinton, or supported Sanders too much in an article, then the Clintons would remember that. And that when she became president, maybe they wouldn't let that person get in. They might use things like being allowed to interview the president, or not being allowed to interview the president, or White House press credentials as ways to reward those who supported her campaign and to punish those who didn't. And so, it's... And I mean, Steve Shives, who, he's not an idiot. Steve Shives knows that access journalism can be manipulated in such a way. So I would just say, there's a lot of There's a lot of different things, a lot of different mechanisms that you can do to show that not only do the Democrats have a fairly undemocratic leadership selection process, but also Clinton's monetary strategy and media strategy also gave her a lot of undue power over the process. He should read Shattered. Shattered actually speaks a lot about it. I did not know Steve Shives was so right wing though. That's sad. Okay. Did you cover my point on 19th century science fiction being leftist? I did not know that. I have like the Time Machine and like War of the Worlds and stuff. Didn't think that science fiction was a lot leftist, although like, there were a lot more leftists in general back then, so wouldn't surprise me. Remember when I said I think physical sex should be a choice rather than a thing imposed from birth? Do you think that the social construct of gender would exist if biology worked like that? Oh boy, I don't know. That's a very hypothetical. I have zero clue how people would respond to that. On Friday, you said an ethical CEO would convert their business into a co-op. Could you still take a big company, McDonald's, say, and convert it into a cooperative and still have it work as well? It would work better. Things have shown that the difference, like the thing is, like McDonald's is not a capitalist, or McDonald's is a capitalist enterprise only when things leave their edges. On the inside, McDonald's is a highly regulated machine that runs like a dictatorship. And in my mind, if I was like put in charge of McDonald's, for example, I would want to, I would say, let's run this like a democracy rather than a dictatorship, and still keep all of like the logistics and planning and stuff like that, because that stuff's good. We should just do that for everything instead of just within companies. Steve Shives also discounted the money issue by saying Hillary Clinton didn't start getting control over allocating DNC money until after she was a candidate. That's patently untrue. Like, it was using the Clinton money thing that I'm talking about is through her foundation, not the charity foundation, but the funding of local elections. Like, the thing is, like, she gives money. She was, her organization was a big donor towards candidates, and giving money to candidates, and specifically withholding money from candidates, was the way that she exerted influence over politicians. Plus, she just has a lot of influence as a person. And so, even if it's not with money, like, she knew that if somebody displeased her, if there was somebody in power who challenged her authority, all she would need to do is find their primary challenger and endorse them. And they would probably, and like, Joe Blow in rural West Virginia or whatever, if they spoke out against Clinton, and then all of a sudden the primary challenger to them in their like local region gets the endorsement of Hillary Clinton, that's going to change the primary process a lot for you, and you could lose your seat. Like, that's the kind of stuff that the Clintons would use to exert authority over people. Steve Shives, we did that. Was the introduction of opinion journalism and professional pundits a major contributor to the state of American politics, or are they a product of American political culture? Yes. Professional opinion havers and like celebrity culture is pretty big in America. It has been for a very long time. The idea of biased journalism is, in my mind, it's been a thing that's been around forever. I don't think that there's been a time where there hasn't been opinion journalism. It just hasn't been so immediate and pervasive. Because after the 1980s, when cable became more widespread and you had 24-hour news channels, all of a sudden having more content, news content to fill up space, definitely pushed more of this stuff. But like, there's stuff like this dating back over 100 years. There were like back in the day, there were like newspapers that like literally just called each other out, and like it was just like openly biased journalism. So in my mind, journalism's never been this like this like this stoic, virtuous, holding people to account type thing that maybe happens on a few occasions, but for the most part, it's never really been the case. Not really. It's been an ideal, not a reality. And so, really, if anything, the internet just ramped it up to the point where by 2016 things were just like on fire. Okay. What do you mean when you talk about communes trading with each other? What about cooperatives that don't have anything valuable to trade? In my mind, we would be in, like, the thing is, we have enough of material to have a post-scarcity economy right now anyway. So when I talk about trade, I'm not talking about trying to benefit from trade, but trying to make things more trying to find a way to logically distribute the resources that everyone needs. But like, we already overproduce like 40% of our goods, which means we make 40% more stuff than we need already. So in my mind, we just wouldn't be worried about like, am I gonna give people stuff if they don't have anything to give me? That's a very capitalist way to think, and it would be more like something called I think the word you'll want to Google is something called the gift economy. That would be more of a thing, or like an Ubuntu-based economy, I guess. Okay. Why is celebrity culture such a massive thing in America? Because America is the place where, oh, that's a good question. There's layers to that question. Media. Why is celebrity culture so big? There is the idea that in America there's fewer media conglomerates that run a lot of things. There is the sort of worship of the individual story. There are a lot of like reasons, but not 100% on that. I think that I'd have to like. There's probably a book out about that I should read. Hello, Christos Nicolaou. If McDonald's was run like a democracy, how would you get people to do the unpleasant jobs, i.e., actually serving food in the restaurant? If it was run like a democracy, the thing about co-ops is that they're still places of work. What you would do, usually in those situations when you're doing something that is like unpleasant, you can either be incentivized to automate away those jobs, or you could pay people more for doing those. A lot of jobs that we consider like not fun jobs or like genuinely unpleasant jobs, part of the reason is because they pay low and they work and they're boring and they take too long. When like, if there were more like the incentivization when you have a more democratic control over things is to automate away those jobs or make them more pleasurable and novel to do. When like if it's a dictatorship, your job is to force people to do it or else they're fired. So the incentives would be completely reversed. When Ben Shapiro was interviewed by a despicable conservative journalist, he tore him apart. I consistently see such objective journalism in the UK and the US, but in the US it all seems to be biased. I think that's because, like, in the UK there's a lot more of, like, staple. Like, the UK has the BBC, has a government-run state media, while like in the United States, there's PBS, but PBS is tiny. So these are all corporate, and so a lot of the time, and also there's fewer media regulations. So fewer regulations plus a profit incentive towards more and more sensational journalism leads to, the kind of yellow journalism you see today. Which do you think will come first in the U.S.? A non-male president, a non-straight president, or a non-Christian president? My hope is non-Christian, because I think that the 46th president or 47th president of the United States is going to be Bernard Sanders. So that's my take on that. All right, I think I might have time for like one more quick question, but then we're gonna have time to, release the video. The video's gonna come out in a few minutes, and the video, by the way, I'll just wrap up from there. Okay. Do you need a McDonald's in an anarchist communist society? Why do you need McDonald's? I imagine you wouldn't need McDonald's, but I mean, like, people like food. In my mind, they probably wouldn't eat as much McDonald's. They'd probably get better food, but I don't know. It would be depending on who. In an anarchist communist society, people would. They're probably. I don't know. People will still want food. There will still be restaurants. Whether it would be McDonald's, different question. All right, so my next video that comes out in less than a minute is get yourself a snack, because it is a half-hour-long video, and it is continuing my series about presidential candidates, and it's about Bernie Sanders. So enjoy my half-hour Bernie Sanders video, and have a good time with it. Here's a link. You guys can get started early. And thank you guys for coming out. I'll see you guys. The next stream is tomorrow. So see you guys tomorrow night, whoever comes out.